Have you ever caught yourself looking at her across the room and wondering when things started to change? She still laughs at your jokes sometimes. She still asks how your day went, but something's missing. That spark you used to feel, it's not quite there anymore. And the worst part is, you can't put your finger on exactly when it started to fade. It just did. One day, the way she looked at you changed. A little less light in her eyes. A little more distance in her voice. Now you're in the middle of your life, and the last thing you expected was to feel unsure about the one person who used to be your biggest fan. But here's the thing, this shift didn't happen overnight. And it didn't happen because of one big mistake. It's almost always the little things. The habits. The slow drift that happens when you stop paying attention. But just because her interest is cooled off doesn't mean it's gone forever. If you're in your prime and ready to step up, you absolutely can turn things around. The truth is, when a woman starts to pull away, it's not usually because of one major event. It's a slow erosion of emotional connection. And if you want to get that connection back, you have to start by looking at where you might have let your edge slip. It's not about blaming yourself, it's about reclaiming your presence. Let's be honest, have you gotten comfortable? Comfortable isn't always a bad thing, but when it turns into complacency, it's a relationship killer. Maybe you've stopped surprising her. Maybe your conversations have become predictable. Maybe you don't look at her the same way you used to because deep down you're distracted. Work, routine, stress, aging parents. Life piles on, and suddenly you're not showing up like the man she fell in love with. This isn't about trying to impress her with grand gestures or buying her something expensive. That's not what she's missing. What she's missing is the version of you who made her feel chosen. The guy who noticed the little things. The one who wasn't afraid to flirt, to tease, to lead with confidence. When that starts to fade, so does her attraction. Not because she stopped loving you, but because she's responding to what's missing. And here's something you might not have thought about. Women are deeply responsive to energy. When you start showing up with dull energy, low enthusiasm, no curiosity, no playfulness, she's going to mirror that back. So if she seems cold or distant, don't start by trying to change her behavior. Change yours. Rekindle your curiosity. Ask her questions like you actually want to know her again. Touch her without expecting something in return. Laugh with her, not just at the same old jokes, but in new moments that remind you both why you're still in this thing. Another reason her interest may be slipping? You've stopped leading. And I don't mean being controlling. I mean having a sense of direction. Plan. A vision. You used to take initiative. Even if it was just choosing where to go for dinner or surprising her with a weekend away. When that stops, she starts feeling like she's in this alone. Women crave the feeling of being led by a man who's rooted, who knows where he's going and isn't afraid to take her with him. You don't need to reinvent yourself overnight. You just need to remember who you were before life dulled your edge. The good news is that guy's still in there. And the moment you start acting like him again, not to impress her, but because you respect yourself, she's going to feel it. Now that we've talked about presence and direction, let's take a look at something even more subtle, but just as powerful when it comes to reigniting her desire. There's a shift that happens when a man forgets to listen, not just with his ears, but with his full attention. You might be hearing her words, but are you catching what's underneath them? A woman loses interest not because you missed one conversation, but because over time, she stopped feeling like her thoughts landed anywhere meaningful. She begins to withhold, not out of spite, but out of quiet resignation. When she senses that speaking her truth leads to silence, defensiveness, or a change of subject, she pulls back. You might not even notice it at first. She still talks about groceries or the kids or weekend plans. But the vulnerable stuff, the hopes, the worries, the parts of her that need you the most, those start to vanish. And once that layer disappears, so does intimacy. Not the kind you can fake with date nights or temporary charm, but the real kind that's built on her knowing she's seen and understood. If she starts to feel emotionally invisible, interest fades no matter how stable everything else seems. Reigniting that connection starts with curiosity. When was the last time you asked her how she really felt and waited long enough for the real answer to come out? Not with an agenda, not to fix anything, but just to witness her. That kind of listening makes a woman soften in ways nothing else can. It doesn't have to be deep or dramatic. Sometimes it's just staying with her when she's venting, instead of offering a solution. Sometimes it's catching the quiet moments when she's reflective and gently stepping in instead of scrolling past her mood. But emotional attention is only half the story. Physical energy plays a powerful role too, and not just in the obvious ways. When she stops feeling your presence in the room, when you become more like furniture than a force, it changes the entire dynamic. She may not say it out loud, but she feels it when your energy is flat. When your body language slouches, when you stop making eye contact, when your touch becomes routine instead of intentional, she notices. And her body starts to shut down too. Attraction doesn't thrive in numbness. What she responds to isn't perfection, it's aliveness. It's when you enter a room with energy, with purpose. It's when your touch has weight, not just physically, but emotionally. A hand on her back that says, "I'm here." A kiss that doesn't feel like part of the morning checklist. These moments rebuild trust in ways that words never could. And let's not ignore what's happening inside you. If you've been feeling emotionally shut down or numb yourself, you can't fake vitality. You have to create it. That might mean shaking up your routines, doing something that challenges you, or even reconnecting with other men who inspire you to show up better. A man in his prime who lives with passion naturally draws her back in. Not because he's trying to win her, but because passion is magnetic, and she wants to be close to whatever wakes her up again. Now, don't confuse all of this with performing. This isn't about becoming someone else to gain her interest back. It's about peeling away the dust that settled on the man she once saw light up a room. The guy who laughed deeply, moved confidently, and made her feel like the center of the universe just by the way he looked at her. The next step is something most men overlook completely, not because they don't care, but because they never learn just how much it matters. It's something subtle, but once you get it right, it changes how she sees you entirely. There's a moment that often goes unnoticed by men in the middle of their lives, a quiet shift where appreciation gives way to assumption. You start to take for granted the little things she does, not out of neglect, but because they have become part of the background. The way she folds your shirts just the way you like, how she always remembers the appointments, or checks in on your mom without being asked. At some point, those gestures get absorbed into the fabric of everyday life, and instead of inspiring gratitude, they get overlooked. And here's the danger. When a woman begins to feel unappreciated, something subtle inside her shuts down. She stops going the extra mile. Not out of revenge, but because giving starts to feel lonely. She doesn't want to feel like she's auditioning for affection or silently competing with your distractions just to be noticed. What used to be her natural way of showing love begins to feel like work with no recognition. And no matter how solid your foundation might be, when a woman starts to feel like she's invisible in the life she helped build, her interest slowly fades into absence. Appreciation is more than saying thank you. It's the tone in your voice when you say it. It's the pause in your day to recognize a small act and actually let her see that it mattered to you. It's the unexpected acknowledgement that catches her off guard in the best way. Not on birthdays or anniversaries, but on a random Wednesday, when she least expects it. That's the kind of moment that makes her turn toward you again, instead of drifting further away. And don't underestimate the power of following through. You might say you love her, that she means the world, that she's your rock, but if your actions say you're too tired, too busy, too preoccupied, she believes what she sees, not what she hears. If you tell her you'll fix something around the house and weeks go by, or if you mention planning a weekend together and it never happens, that erodes trust in tiny daily ways. Not because she cares about the chore or the trip, but because to her, it means she's no longer a priority. Restoring that sense of importance doesn't require grand gestures. What moves her most are the signs that she's still on your mind when she's not in the room. Leaving a note, sending a message just because remembering the conversation she thought you forgot. Those are the acts that say, "You still matter to me," without needing to say it outright. Interest thrives where presence and intentionality live. Not perfection, presence. And here's something many men forget. She also needs to feel desired. Not just loved or respected or admired. Desired. Not in the way you might have done in your 20s, but in a way that reflects who you are now. More grounded, more certain, more tuned in. That quiet confidence of knowing what you want and making her feel like she's still the woman who stirs something deep in you. The way you look at her when she walks into a room, or the way your hand lingers just a moment longer than expected. Those are the moments that reignite the spark, not the words, but the energy behind them. There's one more layer that ties all of this together. It's the part most men miss, not because they aren't capable of it, but because life trains us to focus on doing rather than being. And when you learn to shift that, everything else begins to change. There's a presence that some men carry without even saying a word. It's not about being loud or dominant or always in control. It's about being rooted. When you walk into a room and you're fully in it, not thinking about emails, not distracted by your phone, not mentally escaping, but just there, fully tuned in, she feels that. And in that presence, there's safety, there's interest, and there's a reminder of the man she once leaned into without hesitation. This isn't about reinventing yourself or chasing some fantasy version of who you used to be. It's about peeling back the layers that time and responsibility have wrapped around you and getting back to that steady core that always had a quiet power. That core doesn't try to fix everything the second it goes wrong. It listens. It holds space. It knows when to say something and when to just let her speak without jumping to a solution. That's the kind of energy that draws her back in because it makes her feel understood instead of managed. Sometimes getting her interest back isn't about changing what you do. It's about changing how you show up. You might be sitting right next to her on the couch, but if your thoughts are miles away, she can feel that disconnect. On the other hand, if you're just folding laundry or sharing silence, but your energy is right there with her, that intimacy becomes magnetic again. Not because of what you're doing, but because of how fully you're doing it together. Women are intuitive. She knows when you're faking closeness, and she knows when it's real. She can tell when you're complimenting her out of habit, or when your eyes land on her and you actually mean it. When you pull her close, not out of obligation, but because something in you simply wants to, she feels that difference in her bones. And once she feels that again, her walls begin to come down, not because she was never interested, but because she needed to believe that you still are. Sometimes the best way to reignite connection is through silence. Not the cold kind, but the kind where you simply sit together, no distractions, just presence. You don't always need a grand conversation. You need space where she feels your attention without needing to perform for it. That kind of quiet creates trust. And when trust grows, so does interest. But all of this starts with one shift, letting go of the story that it's too late. Maybe you've heard her before. Maybe you've let things slide too far. Maybe she seems distant now, and you're afraid the window is closing. But here's the truth. As long as she's still showing up in some way, still sitting at the table, still making the coffee, still asking how your day was, then there's something worth fighting for. And the version of you she's waiting to see again isn't gone. He's just buried beneath years of distraction, fatigue, and the weight of being needed in so many directions. You can strip all that back. Not overnight. Not with one big apology or one spontaneous date night, but through consistency. Through showing up just one moment at a time, not with perfection, but with realness. With effort that's quiet, steady, and undeniable. That's how you get her interest back, not by chasing, but by becoming the man who naturally draws her closer without having to ask. And if that version of you has been asleep for a while, maybe now is the time to wake him up. Not just for her, but for you. Because being wanted, respected, and truly connected in the middle of your life isn't a lost cause. It's your invitation to start leading with presence, not pressure. Here's to reclaiming what still matters and becoming the kind of man who doesn't just ask for love, but inspires it every single day.